Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Schools. Happy Thanksgiving. Today we're coming with the 5 stock ups and 5 stock downs, whatever you want to call it, studs and duds. I like to call it 5 fives and 5 lies. Either way, we got to talk about 5 big positives to take away from this game, this win against the Texans, and 5 negatives as well. And again, like I always do, like I always explain, it may not necessarily be one player. It may be a position group. It may be a specific thing about a player, like a specific trait or a specific role. It may be a coach. It can be anything. So we're going to take away 5 big negatives and 5 big positives. Of course, with me being such a big glass half full and optimistic person, we're going to start with the positives. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every game day, whether it's Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night, whenever. Make sure you pull up every game day for the Commanders live play-by-play breakdown, live streams, all of that. Every regular season game, and I'm gonna speak it into existence postseason as well. Make sure you pull up every game. We laugh and we learn together, all of that, man. And without further ado, let's get it. Again, we're starting with 5 positives before we get to 5 negatives. And also, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific player. It could be a position group. It could be a coach. It can be a specific trait about a player, anything. So we're starting with the first, and the first one's got to be the D-line is just unfair and easily the best in the NFL. I feel like we're at the point where we can definitely declare that this defensive line, this Commanders defensive line, is the best in the NFL. And we can even add in there Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen are the best defensive tackle duo in the NFL. And I have a bunch of stats to back it up. First of all, and I already talked about this in the previous video, but the Texans were down quickly on Sunday, forcing them to largely abandon the ground game early. That said, Dameon Pierce did not fare well against the Commanders defense, only gaining 8 yards on 10 carries. His negative 27 RYOE was the 3rd lowest in week 11, despite him facing a stacked box only 10% of his rushes. So that's a big compliment to the defensive line. With Jamin Davis being the only linebacker on the field at times, and the fact that we only stacked the box 10% of his carries, that means the defensive line dominated against the run. That means that allowed the secondary linebackers to be utilized in coverage to make it more difficult for Davis Mills. If you can stop Dameon Pierce with 5 players on average and then use 6 players to stop the quarterback, it makes it really difficult to move the ball, and that's why the Texans were struggling so much. So that all starts with the defensive line. And also going back to the Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen, the best defensive tackle duo in the NFL. Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen each have 6.5 sacks this year, leading the team as well, but they are the only pair of defensive tackles with 5+ sacks in the league. And the duo also has combined for 25 tackles for loss. Nobody else in the NFL is doing that as a pair. Individually, of course, I'm not going to say Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne have surpassed Aaron Donald, but as a duo, there's no duo doing what they're doing right now. And I also think it's really interesting that Jonathan Allen played 80% of snaps, Daron Payne played 75%. Next closest is Montez Sweat, who played 57% of snaps, and James Smith-Williams, who played 55% of snaps. Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen were each in the game for at least 42 snaps. The next highest is Montez Sweat with 32. So we have a healthy rotation of defensive linemen, but those guys are just so dominant, you just don't want to take them off the field, even with how well that everybody else is playing. And of course, I mean, this defensive line got 5 sacks on Davis Mills, man. Montez Sweat and Jonathan Allen had 2 each, and then Daron Payne had the 5th. Even though Montez Sweat was kind of a part of one of those other sacks, so I feel like he should have had 2.5, but it is what it is. But Jonathan Allen himself had 7 QB pressures along with his 2 sacks on 32 pass rushes for a total pressure rate of 21.9. That's ridiculous. He also had 3 tackles for loss. Montez Sweat was close behind with 3 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 QB hits. And then Daron Payne had 3 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass deflected, and 1 QB hit. I mean, these are stat sheet stuffers right here. And then even Casey Toohill is part of the rotation, only playing 41% of snaps. He had 2 tackles for loss, and James Smith-Williams had 1 before he got hurt. So this defensive line alone had 9 tackles for loss, loss and 5 sacks. And were one of the main reasons why Houston only had 5 net yards of offense in the first half. It starts with the defensive line. Point blank, period. I can't wait to get Chase Young back because it's going to be unfair at that point. Now, number 2, are we to the point that we can also declare this secondary elite? I mean, they're creating turnovers now. Bobby McCain, I mean, let's start with the fact that Bobby McCain, you can argue he's like the least liked person out of the secondary, especially out of our fan base. But the fact that he's so versatile enough to go from our starting free safety to now we have injuries, we have guys not stepping up, and Benjamin St-Juste moved to the outside from slot corner. William Jackson's gone. Again, Rashad Wildgoose hasn't played as well as they hoped, and I think there's a mix of injuries in there as well, but I think he's mostly benched. And Danny Johnson played a little bit, but right now, Bobby McCain is our starting slot corner. He went from our starting free safety to starting slot corner. That versatility is amazing in itself. That allows Jack Del Rio to do what he has to do. But just going back to the takeaways real quick, man. The first 5 games, we only had 1. The last 6 games, we've had 12. That's ridiculous, man. That's a huge turnaround. And it's one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that we're winning as many games as we are right now. The defense is carrying the offense. It starts with the defensive line, but even with the defensive line being that dominant, if the secondary isn't balling out the way that it is, and if Jack Del Rio isn't getting creative and utilizing everybody in interesting and in sneaky ways that keep quarterbacks off balance and unsure of what coverages we're running and things like that until post snap, it's creating these turnovers, man. It's huge. It's big time. Our defense was suffocating at first, but now with the turnovers, we're starting to become elite. And again, is it time for us to consider our secondary elite? I mean, first 5 games, we were allowing 345.6 yards per game. Now we're only allowing 276.7. We were allowing 25.6 points per game. Now we're only allowing 15.8. And now, granted, us running the ball so well and winning the time of possession helps with that. But still, man, I mean, this Commanders defense, first 5 weeks, allowing a 103.7 passer rating. Now, these past 5 weeks, only allowing 81.2 on average. I mean, shouts out to Kendall Fuller and Derek Forrest for both of the interceptions that we got this game. Kendall Fuller with the pick 6, Derek Forrest with the crazy interception to barely get his shoulder inbounds after the Benjamin St-Juste deflection. That was big time from both of them. And Kendall Fuller setting the game off with the pick 6. I mean, I felt so confident that we would win after he did that. I already came into the game with confidence, but that was like oh yeah, we're good. We're straight. But shouts out to Kendall Fuller and Derek Forrest for those turnovers, because the Commanders had a +2 turnover differential because of that, since we didn't have any turnovers on offense, which matched our season high set against the Bears. We are 3-1 in games with a positive turnover differential this season and 1-4 in games with a -1. That's a huge stat for us. It's a huge stat in the NFL, period. But as you can see, when we're winning the turnover battle, we're 3-1. When we're losing it, we're 1-4. Huge difference. Also, before we even went into this Texans game, the Commanders defense was top 5 in DVOA, which is like an efficiency rating. And then after this Texans game, I'm pretty sure we're at the very least top 5, if not top 3, if we already weren't. And then safety wise, it's just unfair. Again, to my point, is this secondary elite? Because Pro Football Focus feels like Cameron Curl is the second best safety in the NFL, only behind Kyle Hamilton by 1.3 points of a grade. Kyle Hamilton has an 86.9, Cameron Curl has an 85.6, and then Derek Forrest is 4th. So we have 2 of the top 4 safeties in the NFL. And for me, there's an additional bonus, because out of the top 5, number 1, Kyle Hamilton, and number 5, Andrew Adams, are both from Atlanta. So I have 2 Commanders and 2 people from Atlanta that make up the top 5 safeties in the NFL. Then you just have Geno Stone in the middle, number 3, that kind of ruins it all. But it's almost perfect for me personally. But I mean, I just love the fact that we have 2 Commanders up there. Now, granted, Pro Football Focus grades are not the end-all be-all, but it goes to show that they're at least doing something right. You know what I'm saying? They're not just going to be incredibly off with that. And I feel like Cameron Curl and Derek Forrest have been balling out and deserve Pro Bowl at least consideration at this point. And I love the fact that Jack Del Rio is getting so creative with the safety group. Again, the fact that technically our safety, Bobby McCain, is starting in the slot, but either way, he's on the field even when Danny Johnson comes into the game. He just moves back to safety. Because for Bobby McCain, Cameron Curl, and Derek Forrest to play every defensive snap, all 56 of them, that means 3 safeties are on the field at all times, no matter what. And then again, Danny Johnson played 11 snaps, so that means the times that he's in the slot, that means Bobby McCain is doing something else. That versatility is unfair. And Derek Forrest plays everywhere as well. He plays free safety. He plays in the box. He'll even move in slot sometimes. I mean, he was almost dead even, a third of each of those positions against the Eagles. His athleticism and versatility also allows Jack Del Rio to get really creative with what he does. And it's really hard for offenses to game plan against us, because pre-snap we can show one thing, and then post-snap it can be a completely different thing, because again, Derek Forrest can play free safety in the box, slot corner, whatever. Cameron Curl, the same thing. Bobby McCain can play free safety and slot corner. It's really unfair for teams. And then Kendall Fuller, he is a corner, but he can play a little bit of safety if you need him to as well. And lurk, I mean, his best trait is zone coverage, and that's pretty much what a lot of playing safety is in a way. And as long as he keeps blasting up screens the way that he tends to do, he's pretty much like a de facto safety on the field as well. But he played 100%. He played 100% of snaps. Benjamin St-Juste played 80% of snaps, and Danny Johnson took the other 20. So the only time Danny Johnson came into the game was when Benjamin St-Juste left the game. But Bobby McCain never left the field. Kendall Fuller never left the field. Cameron Curl and Derek Forrest never left the field. And even Percy Butler played 9 snaps. Jack Del Rio's getting so creative with the secondary. Again, this defensive line, it starts with them, it ends with them. This secondary wouldn't be able to do what they're doing with the creativity and showing different looks if the defensive line wasn't consistently getting pressure on the quarterback. But they're still playing at a very high level, in addition to how well the defensive line is playing. And Kendall Fuller did have that 1 pick six, but after that, he was targeted 8 more times, gave up 6 completions for 51 yards, which isn't terrible, but you know. And then again, that Brandon Cooks one, he was playing such off coverage that it's kind of hard to blame him there, but maybe that was his fault. But Benjamin St-Juste was targeted 3 times in coverage. He had 1 pass tipped up, which was the Derek Forrest interception. That doesn't happen without Benjamin St-Juste locking up Brandon Cooks. And I thought that was funny too, because Brandon Cooks killed John Bostic, then he killed Kendall Fuller, like the play I was just talking about. And then after that, like soon after that, I guess Jack Del Rio was like, all right, man, just put Benjamin St-Juste on him. Next thing you know, ball tipped up, perfect coverage, Derek Forrest interception. And again, Benjamin St-Juste was targeted 3 times and allowed no receptions, and 1 of them ended up being an interception, and none of them were caught. None of his 3 targets were caught, and 1 of them again led to an interception. Also, Benjamin St-Juste avoided getting penalized for the first time in 3 games, so he's only getting better and better. Oh, and to add to Bobby McCain's resume against the Texans game, he had a QB knockdown on a blitz and a pressure, and he has 6 combined tackles. So he was out there working, man. He was targeted 5 times in coverage, allowing 4 completions, but only 20 yards. And just overall, the defense is so dominant. The defense held the Texans to 148 total net yards with 21 rushing, 127 passing, and that's all season highs for the Commanders defense. Well, season best. Technically season lows. Again, we held Houston to 5 net yards in the first half, which is the lowest mark by any team this season. Anybody. The best defensive first half of any team in the NFL at all this season. Also, Dameon Pierce was averaging 85.8 rushing yards per game and 4.7 yards per attempt through week 10. On Sunday, we held him to 8 yards on 10 attempts, which is 0.8 yards per carry. That's really bad. But we do got to take into context that this is the Houston Texans. Remember, they are arguably the worst team in the NFL. They had the worst record at 1-7-1. Their offense ranks 30th in the league in points scored, 32nd in total yardage, 30th in first downs, 26th in passing yardage, and 29th in rushing yardage. So we can get excited, and that's what great defenses are supposed to do. Dominate the worst offenses of the NFL. But still, at the end of the day, not only did they dominate, but I mean, they embarrassed them. Again, doing things that no other defense has done in the NFL this season. And again, the Texans are 1-7-1, which means they've played 8 other games this season, and no other defense did to them what we did to them. So, hey, man, I'll still take it. Also, some really interesting stats. Shouts out to Hogs Haven for this. Houston quarterback Davis Mills is also not the best measure to judge Commanders' pass defense, because he has averaged 214 passing yards per game this season, only 8.2 yards better than Taylor Heinecke, with 11 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, and has taken 28 sacks, which is 7th most in the NFL. His 11 interceptions lead the league. Although Josh Allen is just behind him with 10, and he's throwing interceptions right now. I'm already seeing it, like as I'm recording this video, Josh Allen's already throwing interceptions. But he ranks 3rd in interception percentage with 3.4%, with Allen 8th at 2.7, and Heineke's tied with Josh Allen at 2.7 as well. And Wentz is right behind them, 2.6, ranked 11th. According to Pro Football Reference, Davis Mills has the 7th highest percentage of bad throws at 18.8%, although he still trails NFL leader Carson Wentz at 21.2%, and his 29.3 QBR ranks 30th out of active quarterbacks. So again, not a great offense to measure ourselves against, but again, our defense is supposed to be dominant. You're supposed to dominate offenses like that, and we did. And technically even exceeded expectations. Now, number 3 is that this running back duo is unfair, man. I mean, I can dive into all kinds of stats, and Brian Robinson himself, he looked like the Brian Robinson that we drafted finally. It started with the Eagles game a little bit, like that one touchdown run he had where he was able to carry people, but he had one run, probably one of the best 4-yard runs I've ever seen in my life, where he literally should have been tackled in the backfield by like 3 people. He shrugged one guy off and then carried everybody else forward for a first down. And I was third down, I believe, too, and we really needed that third down in that game. That was huge, man. The offensive line really beaming them from Any Given Sunday, and he still made it happen. He had game breaker from NFL Street. I mean, he literally, for no reason, broke too many tackles and carried too many people to a first down. So honestly, on a per snap basis, I felt like Brian Robinson was the better runner today, even though I feel like Antonio Gibson has been the better player and the better runner most games this season, if not all of them. But Brian Robinson stepped up big time. But at the same time, Antonio Gibson, he played more, so of course he had better stats, but still at the end of the day, he had better stats. Gibson had 18 carries to Brian Robinson's 15, but Gibson was on the field for 46 snaps. Brian Robinson was only on the field 23. And Gibson was the Commanders' leading rusher with 72 yards and along at 18, which makes sense. But Brian Robinson wasn't too far behind with 57. And it does kind of suck because Brian Robinson, 15 carries for 57 yards doesn't sound that great. But in the previous 6 games, 44.9% of his total yardage was gained after contact. So he's making this offensive line look way better than they actually are. Almost 50% of his yards come from after contact. That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. He shouldn't have to deal with that, man. Just imagine when our offensive line gets great, like we expect them to be this season, how many yards they'll get per carry. And then Gibson, not very far off, 44.8% of his yards come after contact, which is only 0.1% less. If our offensive line was blocking better, they would be dominating right now. They'd probably be rushing for 100 yards each game type of thing. Also, the Commanders rushed for 153 yards against the Texans, and we have won all 3 games this season when they've rushed for at least 150 yards. That's a really interesting stat to keep track of as well. Number 4 stock up, Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas's involvement in the passing game, man. Finally back, man. I mean, he's been hurt, and then some games, even recently, he was used more as a blocker and more of a threat than like somebody we actually threw the ball to. And he played 46 snaps, which was 68%. John Bates played 35 snaps and Cole Turner played 26. But it's just so great to see Logan Thomas back involved in the passing game. He was our leading receiver with 5 receptions and 65 yards on 6 targets. And this was his best game by far this season and his biggest receiving total since the Seattle game back in week 15 of 2020, where he had 13 receptions for 101 yards. It would be lovely for him to have a game like that again, but I just doubt it. With all of the weapons that we have, it's going to be really hard for Logan Thomas to get 100 yards, but we'll see. But man, Logan Thomas in the passing game is unfair. You're worried about covering Terry McLaurin. You're worried about covering Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel out of the backfield and in the passing game, Antonio Gibson out of the backfield and in the passing game, Brian Robinson. Scott Turner can get so creative and hit you with anybody. And then here comes Logan Thomas. And so if you try to game plan for Logan Thomas, then other guys are going to be open. But if you try to worry about the guys that you're supposed to prioritize, it makes sense to prioritize Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin over Logan Thomas, but then Logan Thomas is just going to eat you up. So it's really unfair, man. As long as Taylor Heinecke isn't overthrowing Logan Thomas by 10 yards consistently like he did in that Vikings game, Logan Thomas should have crazy stats. The way he was targeted in that Vikings game, he should have had a really good game. But again, look, Taylor Heinecke was just overthrowing him by 10 yards. It's crazy you can overthrow somebody 6'6", but he was finding a way. Carson Wentz was doing the same thing too. And then number 5, man, the guy that brings it all together, Scott Turner. Now, granted, we were bad in the red zone. We're going to talk about that later in the stock down. But from the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line, I mean, excellence. Grazie mille. Scott Turner. It was beautiful. It was poetic almost. Again, the way we used Curtis Samuel out of the backfield and in the passing game. I mean, the one great red zone trip we had where we actually scored a touchdown, it was Curtis Samuel off of a handoff for a running touchdown. I mean, just what can they cover? What can a defense stop from us? Honestly, if you focus on one thing too much, the other thing is going to be open or easy. And it's like, I mean, you try to stop our run game. We don't really rush a lot per carry wise, but it gets the job done. So you got to worry about Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson beating you down. You got to worry about Terry Jahan and Curtis Samuel always being open. And then Logan Thomas being a dual threat option at tight end. When he's in the game, they don't know if we're going to throw it or pass it. He can go out there and catch 57 yards, get 57 receiving yards. He can also have the ceiling block for a big 18-yard run from Antonio Gibson. You never know. So Scott Turner has so many weapons at his disposal, but I also still feel like he's doing a great job of utilizing those guys and getting the most out of them. Now, I would like to see more read option with Taylor Heinecke. The only time I vividly remember us doing it against the Texans, it was one of those plays in the red zone. It went for like a negative 3-yard play. So everybody's like, never do that again. But I want us to keep doing that. Just do it more from the 20 to 20. Don't just wait till the red zone. But man, I love Scott Turner's play calling. Against the Eagles and against the Texans, he's doing his thing. He is in his bag right now. Hopefully he can keep it going. Now going to the 5 stock downs. Number 1, Heinecke is too inconsistent and too dependent on our defense and run game being dominant. I mean, if our defense just takes a step back, not even plays bad or plays poorly, if they just take a step back and are good instead of dominant, and if our run game can't get going for some reason, Heinecke's gonna struggle, and I'm definitely worried about that. And that showed in this game. He was just too inconsistent for me. This game wasn't terrible. It wasn't as bad as the Colts game. A lot of people are gonna hype up the Colts game because he had that big come from behind. He led the team to 10 points in 5 minutes, but he was the reason that we were even in that situation where we needed 10 points in 5 minutes to barely win, and then Terry McLaurin having to go up there and do the craziest jump ball against one of the best corners in the NFL. It shouldn't have even been in that situation for real. So overall today, he didn't have the highs that he had from that Colts game, but he also didn't have anywhere near the lows. And I'll take that consistency. Now, granted, that game he had against the Eagles was easily his best, even though he had an interception. He didn't have an interception against the Texans. But against the Texans, it was kind of like did well just enough. He was inaccurate at times. Wish he were more accurate. And, he made a couple of bad decisions. But overall, it wasn't a bad game, but it also wasn't a good one. But I'm going to need him to step up and be more consistent. And I'm going to need him to make better plays and better throws, better decisions. Because if we have a game where our defense isn't holding an opposing offense to 5 yards at halftime, or against the Eagles, our defense isn't out here getting 4 turnovers, it's going to be really difficult for us to win. Our defense is playing historically great right now. And we're still not like winning 40-3 and things like that. We're going to need the offense to step up. It's not all Heineke's fault, but we're doing the stock downs right now. I'm just going person by person. But Heinecke has to step up, man. And number 2, the offensive line is also very inconsistent. Even though when we needed 1 yard, they would help us get it. Outside of that, one Brian Robinson run where he had to carry people and break tackles out of the backfield just to get like a 2-yard first down. Other than that, I remember them kind of getting the push that we needed on 3rd and shorts and things like that. And I think we went for it on 4th down like once. And I think we got that as well. So when we need 1 yard, our offensive line is usually dependable. But when it comes to pass protecting, when it comes to regular running plays, just so inconsistent. There's some plays where they look like a top 5 offensive line, and it's a big hole for Antonio Gibson or Brian Robinson to run through. But most of the time, it's really just Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson making something out of nothing, and that's not healthy. The offensive line is the main reason why our yards per carry is not that good. Again, I already gave y'all this percentage of yards that Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson have to get after contact. That's really ridiculous. Most NFL running backs don't have to deal with that. So offensive line, we need y'all to step up big time, man, and keep Heinecke safe, man, because he's already not that good. And y'all being bad only makes it worse. Now, granted, the reason that Heinecke makes more sense for this offense than Carson Wentz at this point is the fact that the offensive line is not consistent. And we need a guy that can utilize his legs to make bad plays and turn them into positives. So there that goes with Heinecke. But, I mean, offensive line, we still just need y'all to be better. Don't depend on Heinecke to escape pressure. Keep them clean like every other quarterback should be kept clean. Now, what's really interesting about the offensive line is that your center, Tyler Larson, your left guard, Andrew Norwell, your right guard, Trey Turner, and your left tackle, Charles Leno, all played 100% of snaps. But Cornelius Lucas and Samuel Cosmi split snaps. Cornelius Lucas played 38 and Samuel Cosmi played the other 30, which is really weird. That's a really interesting way that they're doing that. Really curious as to why they're doing that. It's probably because Samuel Cosmi still isn't 100% and they just want him on the field as much as they can, but then there's times they got to pull him back and Cornelius Lucas out there, struggling and doing the best he can. But at the same time, so far through week 10, Lucas has the highest run block win rate in the NFL. So when it comes to run blocking, apparently Cornelius Lucas is just dominant. I don't remember seeing that on film like that, but maybe he's just been dominant in the run game and I don't remember. Maybe it's just because he's been so bad in pass blocking that maybe I'm just not seeing his run blocking enough. I just see him getting beat in pass blocking situations and I'm like, I just want him off the field. But who knows, man? We'll see. That's a really interesting statistic, though. And then also, none of the Commanders' offensive linemen made the top 10 in pass blocking win rate at their respective positions. I believe in them, especially when guys come back healthy. Wes Schweitzer's finally starting to practice, so that's great news. Because, boy, if he can take over for Trey Trey Turner, and then we can get Samuel Cosmi starting back at right tackle, I think our offensive line would definitely be better than how it's been. And then number 3, man, Jon Bostic. I mean, I'm pretty sure y'all were waiting on this. Y'all knew this was coming. Jonathan Bostic, man. I got to call him by his first name because, boy, I appreciate him for stepping up. And right now, Jamin Davis and Jon Bostic are our only linebackers that play in games. Literally the only 2 linebackers that recorded a defensive snap. Jamin Davis played all defensive snaps, all 56 of them. And Jon Bostic played 42 snaps, which is 75%. Which again lets you know that Jamin Davis is the only linebacker on the field quite a bit. He had 14 snaps where he was the only linebacker on the field. I don't think y'all understand how ridiculous that is. I know I keep emphasizing that in videos, but that is crazy. Man, I can't wait for Cole Holcomb to come back healthy, man. Golly. Jamin Davis was third on the team with 5 combined tackles and 1 QB hit. And in coverage, he was targeted 3 times with 2 completions, but for only 8 yards. That's not bad. But Jon Bostic, on the other hand, granted, he had 3 combined tackles, but that one time they got Brandon Cooks on him, it was bad. Cooks got him for 41 yards, the Texans' longest play of the game. If you want your longest play of the game, if you can't get nothing going on offense, target Jon Bostic with one of your better receivers. Watch what happens. I mean, that one play accounted for 28% of their total yardage and 32% of their passing production. One play. Jon Bostic off of one play was responsible for 32% of the Texans' passing yards. That is ridiculous, man. So, man, Cole Holcomb, I can't wait for you to come back. Again, shouts out to Jon Bostic for stepping up, and he's not good, but at least he's there. But, man, we got to address linebacker in the offseason. Got to, man. Even if Cole Holcomb and Jamin Davis are fully healthy, we need somebody more dependable as a backup, man, because this is ridiculous. And then number 4, red zone offense, man. Again, just terrible. We only scored 1 touchdown. Offensively, the other touchdown was defense. So the defense literally scored as many touchdowns as the offense did. Without Joey Sly being automatic for the past couple of weeks, who knows how that game goes? You know what I'm saying? So red zone offense between Scott Turner, Taylor Heinecke, and the offensive line, y'all got to be better. Running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, y'all are doing y'all job in my opinion. I'm gonna have to go look at the all 22 again to like really clamp down to see what the problem is, but it's definitely a mix of Scott Turner, Taylor Heinecke, offensive line, either one or all 3 of those factors, maybe just 2 of them every given play. Every play that something goes wrong is one of those guys' fault or one of those groups of people fault. Always. And then lastly, the health of the team, man. The health of the team is not looking too good. Cole Holcomb's already been gone for a few weeks. It looks like he won't play this upcoming game against the Falcons. He didn't participate in practice on Wednesday. We'll see. James Smith-Williams and Benjamin St. Juste got hurt in that game against the Texans. That's one of the main reasons why we didn't want to run up the score. We wanted to get out of that game as soon as possible, run the clock out, keep running the ball and things like that, convert third downs and keep running the ball some more. Why Antonio Gibson had a touchdown at the end of the game, but chose to just slide so we can continue to run the clock out. We didn't want any more injuries because we already got James Smith-Williams and Benjamin St. Juste banged up. And both of those guys did not participate in practice on Wednesday as well. And then you have our starting center, Tyler Larson, David Mayo, our backup linebacker, Dax Milne, backup wide receiver, Logan Thomas, all limited in practice on Wednesday. We'll see how they practice for the rest of the week leading up to the Falcons game, but it's not looking too good. Now, granted, Taylor Heinecke technically has a back injury, but he fully participated in practice on Wednesday, so he's straight. And then Chase Young, I mean, positive news, this is his first time on the injury report, and they had him as a limited participant, so I'm excited. But overall, man, not having your starting linebacker, your starting left defensive end, and your best corner, it's not looking good, man. So the team health got to improve, man. And again, we still already have guys on IR. Wes Schweitzer is starting to practice for the first time in like 5 weeks, but he's still on IR with his concussion situation. Chase Roulier, our starting center, we probably lost him for the entire year. It's not looking too swell. And then again, Samuel Cosmi, he's not on the injury report, but he's not even starting. The man is almost splitting snaps in half with Cornelius Lucas. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, just some random stats. This is the first time that Washington has had a winning record past opening day in the 3 seasons under head coach Ron Rivera. The last time Washington had a winning record past week 1 was week 12 of the 2018 season before Ron Rivera got here. Also, the last time Rivera had a winning record as a head coach past week 1 was week 10 of the 2019 season when he was still the Panthers head coach. But that same season, they eventually ended up going 5-11, resulting in his firing. I think they went on like a 5 or 6 game losing streak, just something terrible, which is how he got fired and how he ended up becoming our head coach. Also, the Commanders 23-10 defeated the Texans, was their second victory by more than 10 points in 2 weeks. The last time Washington put together back-to-back wins by greater than 10 points was the 41-16 stomping of Dallas in Week 12 of the 2020 season, following the 20-9 win over the Bengals in Week 11. Also, shouts out to Hogs Haven for this as well. As of Week 11, Carson Wentz has played 422 of 772 total offensive snaps, which puts him at 54.7% of offensive snaps. Don't even risk it. Don't play him again this season. If Taylor Heinecke, for any reason, goes out there and starts to lay eggs, go with Sam Howell over. I just don't even risk giving them that second round pick, in my opinion. It would be different if Carson Wentz was balling out, and then maybe you could try him. We'll see. I mean, I guess we'd be willing to give up that second round pick any day if he can carry us to the playoffs, but I don't know, man. That's an interesting debate, but I just wanted to update y'all on how many snaps he's played in the percentage, because remember, there's a 70% threshold that would turn a third round pick that we send to the Colts to a second round pick that we send to the Colts, which would get ugly. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. As always, man, I appreciate the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors, whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm gonna catch y'all later, man. Appreciate y'all. Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. I'm out.